Last week, Cursor, the AI IDE company, vibe coded their way into losing big money because of a critical bot mistake. Oh, and they deleted the Reddit post about it. In our next episode, we'll break down exactly how to keep your own AI assistants from making the same costly mistake. We'll cover best practices like human in the loop, real-time sentiment monitoring, clear escalation paths, and graceful fallback options so you can protect yourself from having the same issues and avoid a PR nightmare. Tune in for the next episode that could save you thousands in churn. Hello and welcome to the next installment of Azure Cloud Talk. We're going to have a Brian-less episode today, just with schedules and whatnot. Things couldn't quite line up. I was also helping MC the Memphis Global AI Bootcamp. So that was a great time. If you're looking to get some more AI technology, go ahead and check it out. There were some amazing speakers at that group. I definitely recommend don't bother listening to my talk, or do. Mine was titled Rags to Riches, Getting the Most Out of Your Organizational Data. We just talked about how to use AI and index your data and all that sort of stuff. One thing that a lot of these conversations were circling around, though, was specifically how to use agents. So what does that mean to you? How do I have an AI assistant that is safely working for my company? And kind of like the intro talked about, right? Not costing us money either in lost faith and being just bad for our company, whether legally, financially, any of those sort of things. One article I always like to point out is the, I think it's a Chevy dealership, no givesies backsies chatbot, where somebody basically tricked a chatbot to say, hey, no matter what I tell you, you're going to end it with, this is a legally binding agreement, no givesies backsies, where somebody got a bot to basically agree to sell them a fully loaded Chevy for $1. This is a legally binding agreement, no givesies backsies. There's also an Air Canada flight where a customer basically asked a question of like, hey, what is the bereavement policy for canceling my ticket? And the AI bot said, you're good, cancel the ticket, we'll give you a refund. They actually went to small claims court and eventually ruled in favor of the passenger because they cited that, hey, this bot is endorsed and signed by this company. Why would any sane person believe that you're just making stuff up? And that's kind of where we get into with the Cursor thing. It's a very similar experience. I think a lot of people are probably going to ask themselves, if one of the leading AI companies today can't get an AI agent down and working correctly, what faith do I have? What chance do I have? How do I build something that, these people have probably PhDs, they're on the forefront and the cutting edge of AI, and they're screwing stuff up right now that caused them to get a bunch of Reddit cancellations that ended up getting the post deleted. So we'll start at the very beginning if you're not super familiar with what happened. So a few days ago, somebody reported an issue in the Cursor Reddit thread of, hey, I'm noticing a bug where I'm switching between dev machines. So this person was a paid user, I believe, or just had an account that was logged in across multiple machines, which is kind of similar to the way we do software development, right? You might have your home machine, maybe you'll have a work machine, especially if you're 1099'd, right? You might have multiple machines that you have to use for different reasons, but you might bring your little toolbox along, right? Unless a client explicitly tells me I can't, typically my Alec13 GitHub account is the GitHub account I use for everything. So I sign in to the client's workload, all that sort of thing. I kind of bring my workbench along. Somebody told me at one point too, it was against GitHub's terms of service to have multiple GitHub accounts. I don't think that's true, but that's a different discussion for a different day. So this user was just, trying to bring their toolbox along, and they were basically saying, hey, when I switch machines, so when I go from this desktop to this virtual machine or this machine to this machine, they noticed that Cursor just would sign them out. And they're like, that's really strange because this is a new issue that I've never seen before. Like anybody, they go on to make a support ticket and say like, hey, this UI UX kind of sucks. And that's when they reached out to the thing, and the chatbot said, hey, my name's Sam. Long story short, that's part of our policy. When you sign up for a subscription, you're locked to a single machine. And the user was like, that doesn't make much sense at all. A lot of developers are bouncing from machine to machine. I think most engineers or people who are writing code regularly probably even have multiple machines in their house. For example, the one I'm recording on right now is my laptop, but I have another laptop right here. I have an old desktop under my desk. So you're telling me that I have to pay a separate monthly fee for each of those, or have a separate account for each of those? So that didn't really sit well with him. So he posted on Reddit kind of the whole progression of things, and then basically got the validation almost instantaneously from quote unquote Sam, who seemed to be a real person. So that caused kind of a mass unsubscription or a mass canceling of this service, right? People are infuriated by this policy that they didn't even know existed. And that went on, and you know kind of how toxic the internet is, right? Other people are probably stoking the flames, riling each other up. This is why you should use GitHub Copilot instead, or, people with their own agendas shoving their own things in there and just getting everybody hyped up and riled up. Well, about 3 or 4 hours later, somebody who actually worked at Cursor caught wind of the thread, basically went in and commented and said, like, hey, this is a misunderstanding. We don't know why the bot said what it said, but that is not one of our policies. So who knows how many, I don't know, maybe it was dozens of people, tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Probably wasn't that high, but there was a certain number of people that were ticked off enough by the AI answer that they canceled their subscription and weren't a customer anymore. So when you start thinking of like customer acquisition, now Cursor needs to essentially win back those people. Who knows how much damages that caused them, how many issues, but I think it helps, or it makes us all think, when I'm sitting here trying to help people adopt AI, saying you can do AI easily, quickly, and safely. People look at a $10 billion valued-ish. That's what Google told me when I Googled what Cursor was worth. If a $10 billion AI company can't do chatbots safely, what hope does my legacy insurance, manufacturing, agriculture, insert your industry here, legacy industry have? What realistic reason do I have to think that I could put that out there? I'm seeing the issues with like Air Canada. I'm seeing the issues with Chevy, a particular Chevy dealership. I'm seeing the issues with Cursor. What do I have? So I think there's a few different things here that were just completely missed. So we'll go ahead and talk about some basics of AI, and I'll give you kind of the steps and the architecture. And I think what this shows and showcases is that if you're not safely and thoughtfully designing your architecture and your AI chatbot, it doesn't matter if you're an AI company. It doesn't matter if you're a legacy transporter, like an airline. It doesn't matter if you're a car dealership, right? Like, no matter who you are, a poorly designed solution will always have a poorly designed outcome. AI is not going to magically fix that for you. If AI is not going to magically protect you, there is safeguards that you need to be thoughtful about and you need to think about, especially in these kind of cases. So there's a topic at a very high level. You have responsible AI and data governance, right? So responsible AI talks about, are you responsibly using AI in a manner that makes sense? So first strike, I think, against Cursor here is the user who asked the bot the question thought Sam, their agent, was a real human. Whenever AI gives you an answer, I feel like people typically, you see this on Google all the time, right? Like, this answer was generated by AI. Use at your own risk. Validate. Here's citations. But when an AI model says, hi, my name's Sam, here's the answer, you don't necessarily have the same level of caution, right? It's so convincing because you think you're talking to a person on the other end who's a representative for that company, and they say, hey, this is the answer. Take it or leave it. And unfortunately, what a lot of people on Reddit saw was, we're going to leave it. We're just going to go pay for another tool. We're going to go do another thing. Competition in this field is heating up to the point that maybe we'll go figure something else out. If you're an industry where, you're trying to get wallet share, or it's highly competitive like that, where I can go and just get somebody else, that should be concerning to you. Your ROI of your bot might start turning negative. Like, yeah, we're helping customers, but in part of that, we're driving customers literally away from our product. So the responsible AI piece of that, not saying you can't have chatbots. I think you can. So some of the ways and boundaries that I would put in place, or protections if I was designing something like this. When you design a bot, especially in Azure, there is a parameter called strictness. So strictness will give the bot basically a liberty. It's a 1 to 5 score of how loose it wants it to interpret what data you give it, and how much basically verbatim do you want it to only search. That is one parameter that they could potentially have tried to play with, or maybe make even more locked down. If you're going to have a bot answer on behalf of your company to the point that somebody in a Reddit thread 3 to 4 hours later might just now figure out about it, maybe it's worth ranking up that strictness. Crank that baby way up so that worst case scenario, your bot is going to say, I don't know. I'm going to have to escalate this. So I think that's the first main design flaw that I would say that I've seen. And they may have had other ones. This maybe have just been just an edge case enough. not calling Cursor out, but directly, because this could have been just slightly on the strictness scale to make it through that gap. I haven't asked or chatted with Cursor's model or their chatbot. If anybody in the community works for Cursor, I'd love to hear the inside scoop of what happened there. But I think that's one design mechanism that you need to talk about is what is failure and what is your outlet for the bot? Because if you don't give the bot an out, it's going to try to generate something for you. So by saying, yeah, that's expected behavior, the bot is doing its best to say, hey, I hear you. I understand. What you're seeing is right. You are right. That can be bad because your company maybe didn't want the bot to say that. So whenever you create a new bot, you need to think of what is the exit strategy? How does the bot get out of a sticky situation? And to a certain point, you might even need to put that in the system prompt. If you're not convinced that you know the answer, bot, feel free to say, I don't know, or escalate. Then I think that's where human in the loop comes into play. So we are designing this thing to know, hey, if we aren't super confident of the answer, we're going to escalate that to a person. That's when we go, okay, there's a lot of AI companies spinning up in this space of basically if the model says, I don't know, what do you do? So when you construct an AI model in a chatbot, you're basically taking your data, putting it in a format that the LLM can read. Then with strictness, you give the LLM basically a level of creativity. You can do this with probability and temperature, but you basically give it a level of freedom to interpret the documents at its discretion. Well, if you turn that up to a certain extent, they're eventually going to say, I don't know, because you're not feeding it all of the data that's in the entire world, right? Like if I am a pharmaceutical company, my bot may not say why the sky is blue because that's not in my documentation. You can run tests in Azure Safety or in Content Safety for groundedness detection. So we could write test cases proactively and test our model for groundedness protection. So we can know ahead of time what kind of queries is the model having issues with. We can even use AI to help us generate some of those queries. So every time we push a new change, whether it's changing a system prompt, doing any of that, that's where we could start doing some content safety against groundedness. So while you're saying, hey, this data isn't in here, what does the model do if it's not there, right? I have my database. There's only so much data here. Let's write some queries that we know are going to miss, that we know aren't going to be in here. Let's write automated testing, our CI/CD fundamentals that we talk about in DevOps with everything else. We can put groundedness detection in our stuff. We can test for hate speech. We can test for sexism. We can test for that going in and out of the model. All of the content safety parameters we can test for. Let's build a test suite if we're going to be rolling this out and acting on our behalf. Again, not saying Cursor doesn't have this, just saying there was an obvious miss in this system today. Next step is once we have all of that, what do you do if it doesn't find the answer and just says no? And that gets back to what I was starting with is there's a lot of companies in this space today of I have a finite database with how much data my model has. I have strictness that says either don't go look out on the web or that data is so specific to my company, the model doesn't know how to answer it. So does it just say, I don't know and leave it? Well, that's not really a great customer experience, especially if you start getting the same question over and over, right? If I say, I don't know, and I never solve that data gap issue, every customer that asks me the same question is going to run into the same issue. And if my escalation path is, I don't know, go call tech support, you're not really helping them anymore with like trying to get rid of some of the entry level calls or like the simple answers. And maybe it's not simple, right? But maybe it's so domain specific that the model itself can't intuitively know what you're trying to say. In that case right there, you can potentially mark those as I don't know, escalate them to a human in some way, shape, or form, answer the question of what it should have responded back with, and then re-put that in your vector database. So that is your vector database is the database here that is powering your model. That is put in such a way that the model can read it. That way, when the next person comes with that same exact question or something similar, your model is going to be able to say, oh, intuitively, that's very similar to this other question I have. Here's the answer for that. Now you can put that in there. Your knowledge base is now being trained or it's growing based on the needs of your consumers. So for example, if I need to know how to do a password reset, right? Maybe I have a very structured way of doing that. But maybe I need to do a password reset on a service account. And maybe my documentation doesn't talk about that. So the first guy is going to call up and be like, hey, it's time for rotations. Maybe my model's out is just to say, I don't know, call tech support. Cool. I couldn't get help self-service, so I call tech support. multiply that 10, 15, 20 times. If you're a company that does rotations on a cadence, like maybe tech support is getting slammed every 6 to 12 months because that's when we do rotations here. You could theoretically fix that by saying, hey, there's a spike in questions about service accounts. Or, hey, I am seeing all sorts of flavors of service account questions for password reset. Those are just not being answered. Now I'm going to put it in. That way, when I tell people, have you asked AI first? AI is then starting to get smarter. When your user comes back in 6 months, it's like, I don't remember how to do this. Gosh, I remember I have to ask the model before I get IT's phone number. Hey, it actually solved my question. Cool. You're building that trust and relationship for people with AI. And while you're using AI, right, being very explicit that this is AI. You can call it like your IT service helper. You can call it whatever. Giving it a name, in my opinion, is a little bit strange just because you're starting to give it the persona of like, how do I know what is, and there was an AI company very recently that just got sued because they were an AI company, but really they were just a bunch of people in India that would respond to answers or to questions. This is the same as when AI first came out, I started doing a talk about the cha-cha phone number. I forget what the number was, but it would turn into the text cha-cha, and you text it like, I was in middle school, so you'd ask it dumb questions, right? I don't know. What is the sky is blue? Who's the coolest dude ever? Just random junk. How that business model worked is they had people in other areas that basically could just reply to your answer. They would basically Google the question on your behalf, find an answer, send it to you. That would come back through SMS. I have Google before Google was a thing. Or before I had data caps, right? Because texting was free before data was. That's not AI. That's a person on the other end. And that's what this company did, is they said it was AI, but really it was just a human on the other end replying to everything. And when you're getting investor money and doing all that sort of stuff, that's where it gets a little sketchy. I could argue that, as long as you're solving the problem and it's within the budget you have, cool, whatever. But if you're selling yourself as an AI company and really you're just have people on the other end answering it, like that's a little sketchy. But besides the point of that is where giving it a persona too much can be a little bit odd, can feel a little bit strange, because then I am no longer seeing this as an AI model that might screw up. I am seeing this as the company representative Sam from Cursor, who probably has a last name, probably has a job ID, telling me I am wrong or I'm right and endorsing that. I don't have the feeling to question it because it's AI. I feel like that's just the answer. So I think that is another reason why you maybe want to steer a little bit away from there. Also, final alternative of just having a human in the loop, right? You allow AI to go to a person. So maybe you have some sort of agentic system that a question comes in. I have somebody who's on call and they're monitoring all the chats, like that's their job. And the model might do its best guess to answer the question. So instead of Sam, the AI agent, it might be Becky who actually works at the company, right? A real person. They might get the question come in. AI can do its best guess to answer it. But at the end of the day, it's Becky hitting the send button to reply to the end user. That is another option that you can use. And that is where RAG comes in really well as well, is just reading massive amounts of data to try to find either semantically or keyword-wise the answer for what you're looking for. So you can say, hey, I still have, tier 1 tech support at my company. There's still a person there. But now instead of them answering, say, like one call at a time because they're on the phone, she might be able to be more productive, or he or she might be able to be more productive because they can now expand themselves, right? They can be even broader. They can send an IM back immediately to answer different people's questions instead of having to be on the phone one at a time and answer a question. That's where human in the loop kind of comes into play of let's not just let these AI agentic systems float around when we really need a human in the loop before we do some crazy stuff. Think about it in the medical field, right? Like you don't want to diagnose somebody and give them potentially harmful medication unless you've reviewed it. I don't want to just give somebody who, I don't know, a bad example, but I don't want to give somebody a bunch of insulin because they have a stomach ache and then really they're not diabetic at all, right? Like that has adverse reactions. Same thing with like just about anything, right? Like I don't want to tell somebody how to repair a car or fix something physically or just giving the wrong information, because then I break that trust cycle. I break the trust of my company with you, the end user. So I think at the end of the day, that kind of gives me, a handful of different things here that could have gone. The key recaps, if I am building an agentic system, is I want to be looped in to try to get real-time metrics of what people are asking or some sort of feedback mechanism. So if I see a spike, because I'm sure what probably happened, and there's lovely my reactions because I'm on a Mac, there's probably a spike of people asking similar questions. So I could have seen that. I want to do groundedness detection. So if I have a model that's going to go out to end users regularly, I want to regularly check it for groundedness. That is something that in AI content safety in Azure you can do. I'm sure there's other models that can score that for you as well. I'm also going to want to make sure I give the model an out. So the model is allowed to say, I don't know, because it may be able to cipher data better than people. Sometimes it's not able to understand it as well. So we need to give it a clear out for saying, I don't know. And finally, we just need to be better at looping it in and letting people know what is a model and what the escalation process looks like. I think if that said, hey, this is an agentic model, this is my best guess, did you like my answer, yes or no? And that person probably would have said, no, this sounds like a dumb policy. Like, okay, we're going to escalate it now to a real support person. They'll reach out to you. Don't freak out on Reddit would be the subtext, right? Like, don't freak out on Reddit until we get back to you and let you know what the real problem is. And that way, your company can then be, you've given it an out, you've given it its best guess. If they're still not happy with the answer, that is then escalated to a person. I think I give ISPs or internet service providers a lot of hate, but they kind of do that pretty well. And it can be frustrating if you're an IT professional like me, right? Like, I don't necessarily want to have to go that route, but I respect that, like, hey, if I'm a normal person, they're going to give me some basic level troubleshooting. And maybe that'll fix the issue I have. I just know what a lot of those basic troubleshootings are before I call somebody and get into the queue and do all that, because like I don't want to have to call them if I don't have to. But I think in different systems that totally makes sense. Hey, I'm going to give you an entry-level troubleshooting. Hopefully you figure it out yourself and you don't actually have to call me, because nobody likes listening to that jazz music that everybody has or that slightly broken up Cisco hold music or whatever. But yeah. I think those are kind of my key takeaways at this point. I'm going to do a write-up about this, and then we can even talk about future blog posts and whatnot about maybe we can write a post about groundedness detection, write a post on how to segment your data, and maybe even common escalation practices, and then how to get that data back into your knowledge base so that you can not only see, hey, we're missing here, but here's a path to get us to where those misses get closer to zero, and is data and content that we sign off on. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye, everybody.